2013. Roles such as Gleaning coordinator, distribution manager, and truck driver. They design, manage, and onboard all technology systems at BAG with a focus on maintaining accurate and effective data tracking across all their programs. They are certified Salesforce administrator and have also worked with other Gleaning organizations and other nonprofits as a Salesforce consultant. Ezra has been an independent Salesforce consultant and admin for more than 10 years, working with a wide range of nonprofit organizations and for-profit companies. In the past few years, he's found an enjoyable niche working for a number of Gleaning organizations, which he likes because he gets to work. I have to do all this in my head now. There's a lot of eyes in here. Gets to work with good people doing something of great benefit, and also because it gives him a chance to design and configure Salesforce for operational procedures that represent real food moving around instead of the various pieces of software being sold. He loves to work as a Salesforce mechanic. Between Matt and Ezra, they've designed and built Salesforce systems for a handful of Gleaning organizations. They'll discuss what makes sense to make a leap to Salesforce, and if you do, how to think about hiring an admin or a consultant. They'll share some of the common architectures they've used to show a few of the ways that they've been able to extend the Salesforce platform to serve employees, farmers, recipient organizations, and volunteers. They'll also show ways that data collection and reporting have informed day-to-day discussions and longer-term goals. I'm going to turn it over to Matt and Ezra.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we can start the presentation. I thought we were going to have to introduce ourselves, so you can skip this slide. That for us. Right, so presentation goals. Before we really start, I want to know, folks here, raise your hand if you've ever used Salesforce before. In front of us. All right, so most people, not everyone. Raise your hand if you currently work somewhere that has Salesforce. Okay.
There's more people who just raise their hand.
Cool. Okay. Raise your hand if you've never, no, we already know that. Raise your hand if you're thinking of getting Salesforce at your organization. Okay, good. Now let's just set it. Yeah, so we're gonna try and kind of give you some ideas. Is Salesforce right for your organization? It seems like most people are already using it, so we won't go too much into that, but it is important if you're already using it to kind of consider like, if it's still right for you, because it might not be. We've already heard a couple of stories today, folks like, yeah, we had Salesforce, didn't work, moved on to something else. Talk about customizing a little bit and fun tricks to get the most out of it. Next slide. Right, so when is the right time to implement Salesforce? So we get this question a lot. Sometimes I forward it to Ezra, depending if it's really complicated, and I think it might turn into a consulting gig for him, because it's nice to give me tips, I give it business. But sometimes I can just kind of take the call, especially if it's a Gleaning org. I love chatting with other Gleaning organizations, but it kind of comes down to how complicated is your data, how complex, how many different data points over the course of a year, let's say, are you going Gleaning 5 times a year? Probably don't need to, right? Unless you're Gleaning a lot of stuff with a lot of people, and it's going a lot of different places. Again, the complexity and the volume, kind of like there. Bell curve, whatever, yeah. I'm sorry, I'm not very good at stats, good point, but despite my job. So yeah, when we're talking about complexity of kind of like transactions, so gleans, so donations of the food going place, volunteers, if that's something you want to be tracking with Salesforce. And then kind of what are your needs around that data?
Yeah. Hey, I'm sorry. One thing to add to that is that in my experience, different Gleaning organizations have different complexities of overall operation. So Boston area Gleaners is so complex that I don't even really understand it, but they're Gleaning food, they're getting donations of food, they're donating food, they're selling food. Do you accept donations? Yeah.
Yes, please.
They're getting donations. They're
we sell the food that we buy for Boston Food. So, yeah.
And you're also managing volunteers,
Yeah.
right? And so each one of those things adds a layer of complexity to your organization, which I would say pushes you closer to it being the right time to implement Salesforce. If you're just doing one or two of those things, you're earlier on, you're less likely, or you may be a mature organization, that may be all you do, you're less likely to need Salesforce.
Just to back up a second, we're talking about Salesforce here because that's what we know. There are many systems that you could use, and we'll go into why Salesforce. Like, why are we talking about Salesforce? Why is everyone like, what should we get Salesforce instead of, I don't know, Airtable, or developing your own SQL database and, you know, coding scripts to make it work for you? We'll get into that, but just to kind of take a step back from that. So some other, just kind of like talking about the complexity of data. What are you trying to get out of the data? Reporting priorities, forecasting, business planning. You just need the total pounds over the course of the year. You can probably sum that up in an Excel spreadsheet, or worst case scenario on a piece of paper, just a calculator, right? But are you trying to gather the average number of farms that donated between 2,000 pounds of beets and 5,000 pounds of beets versus apples in a given date range or whatever, and kind of that matrix of data out, which can help with fundraising, which can help with business decisions. Again, the more complex, the more likely you are to need a system like Salesforce. Other examples of getting data out of the system, Salesforce can be pretty good at labeling product or sending and printing documents directly from the system. We'll talk about a few different things that you can add on to Salesforce. It's a huge company, so there's a lot of add-ons, free and not free, that can be added on rather than like an Excel spreadsheet where you can't, there's a lot, you have to develop your own script, develop your own coding to get that, develop it, or create a PDF from the data. Another thing that's Boston Area Gleaners does, at least, and I know some other orgs do, is food safety traceability. So tracing, kind of knowing once food leaves the organization, do we have to say where it came from in case there's some sort of food safety recall or whatever. Not going to dive too much into that, but just another example of complex data. I'm happy to chat about that afterwards if anyone wants to talk about that. Data in, so the data entry side of things, Salesforce is pretty good at that, but it requires some customization. As was pointing here in my notes, spreadsheets are pretty good for data, right? You just enter across the row, hit enter, go to the next row. Worst case scenario, you create a Google form, which works directly with a Google Sheet, right? So Salesforce isn't the best tool for data in, but it is good at data out. It has all reporting capabilities. It has, like I said, the add-ons. And then data within. So Salesforce is very good at automation of data within the system. Automatically updating inventory. You're holding inventory in refrigeration, for example. And one last thing we good for is just any relational database, connecting the dots between things. So you can have a volunteer who's also a donor, donating money, who may also be an email subscriber, who may also be a farmer. We have a farmer who's a donor, not of money, but of banana. So could track that in Salesforce. Ezra's famous guideline here is use Excel until it hurts. At that point, you're probably ready for something. I could have gotten to that slide while I was talking about it, but the next thing, if there's anything you want to add there, Ezra? Yep. Is Salesforce really free? Go to the next slide. So technically, Salesforce is free for up to 10 users for any nonprofit. You apply to their, I think it's still called the Power of Us program. You get 10 free users, which usually costs, if I remember correctly, $1,000 a year for those users. So you're getting, it's a pretty good value, $2,000 for free for your organization. But out of the box, Salesforce only provides you with something called Nonprofit Success Starter Pack, NPSB, always forget what the S stands for, and a newer version that they call Nonprofit Cloud. Not relevant, other than what they're providing you with out of the box is a way to manage donors, monetary donors. And it's a pretty bare bones system at that. So the chances of that free Salesforce working for you out of the box, for Gleaning specifically, for tracking asparagus and beets, farms and volunteers and where the food goes and all that, is nothing, because you have to customize it. So we'll talk a little bit more about this, about the customization, but that's going to cost something. It's either going to be someone on your staff, that you're paying. Maybe a volunteer if you're lucky, but it is a lot of work, or consultant. You're also probably paying. What else did I miss here? There are other ways of saving money once you get over 10 users. I don't really get into detail there, but
Well, mention the name, because a lot of people are already using it. And
okay, yeah. So if you're already using Salesforce, there's this license. They'll try and sell you, if you get over 10 users, they'll try and sell you this. I think it's called the unlimited, the enterprise license, which is the ones that you already have for free. But there are ways that if you're using certain parts of Salesforce for tracking food and whatnot, not the traditional part, you can buy platform licenses, which are way cheaper. They're a couple $100 a year. So at Boston Area Gleaners, we have the 10 free users and then 5 of the platform users, and it saves us, again, much more money. We have 15 total users. That's just another example of at some point, Salesforce isn't free. You only get 10 people who can use it. Depending on the size of your organization, it might not be enough. And there's other ways of kind of using what are called an experience site, which is basically a public-facing website to interact with the Salesforce database to have your staff or your volunteers or whoever input or get out data. Technically, it's against the terms of service of Salesforce, but it depends on how you use it. And those licenses are a lot cheaper, or it can be free if you create it in a special way. We'll talk about a little bit later too. Anything else on the?
One thing to add there. Oh, yeah, in terms of sort of the cost of Salesforce, when you think about it, in a large scale, is that whenever you move from one system to another, even if it's like Excel sheets to a CRM for the first time, CRM is customer relationship management tool. Whenever you do that, I spend a lot of time with clients working through their operational processes. And sometimes they're so ingrained that you don't necessarily think about them, especially if it's just been you doing them for a while. But anytime you move to a system, things modify, things change. So the system will change how you think about doing your work. And hopefully for the good, but there's also like your time spent in doing that. It's time spent in retraining employees or so there's no such thing as a free lunch. It does cost money, even though they give it away for free. Right, consultant versus internal admin. Which is a funny thing for me to speak about because I am a consultant. And thank you for having me. And I always feel a little bit like a sort of predatory shark when I come to conferences like this. I shouldn't be here, but I try to be thank you, a nice predatory shark. I have a 4-year-old, so that's where my mind is. Anyway, so my thinking is that most organizations will need 2 things. They'll need someone within the organization who it becomes part of their job to run Salesforce. And that can be anywhere sort of on a technical slider from just knowing how it works, entering data, making sure that the data is good, which a system will never make good data for you. There's always a human element to that. So it could be that, or it could be all the way on the other side of the scale, which is Matt, who took this on and learned, became a certified admin, learned all the tricks, and is really awesome at, twisting Salesforce into all the knots that Boston Area Gleaners want it to be twisted into, right? So not every organization is going to have someone who's that technical, but you do need someone internal who owns Salesforce as part of their job. You can't just have a consultant. It will just crash and burn. And I would say similar with volunteers. You may get a volunteer who says, oh, I'm a Salesforce admin. I love your organization. You got to have someone internal, otherwise it will fall apart. And then I think often, not always, it is useful to have someone external, just for sort of purposes of getting the shortcut of someone who's worked with a bunch of different organizations and maybe can often hear what you need and jump to a solution that might work for you, just from sort of experience. There is a term, I don't know if any of you have heard this, called accidental admin. It's super common in the Salesforce world. Salesforce is one of their like slogans is clicks, not code. And of course the clicks are like the clicks create the code, but I'm not a developer. I don't sit there and write code. What that means is a lot of times you sort of accidentally get pushed into this admin role. That happened to me. I think it happened to Matt. It's like, you're the most technical person on staff. Can you learn this? Accidental admins are awesome. You don't need to like have a computer science degree. I studied history and political science. I have no idea what I studied. Spanish. There you go. Right. In terms of like what an external person is good for and what I think you should have an internal person own, I always think about like ownership must be internal. And so I will often softly refuse to train people. And I'll work with someone internally to develop training materials, to develop a training plan, to develop the skills they need to train. But people, you want to listen to one of your colleagues. You don't want to listen to a consultant, I think. And also, again, like you don't become reliant on always having a consultant. You want to retain that knowledge and ownership internally. And then the other thing is think about the cost of modification. So how often will the process that you're designing in a system change? If the process is stable, it's okay to hire someone to do something fancy in Salesforce and it'll just keep working and everything is great. But if the process is going to change a lot, then if you take the nuclear option, as we sometimes say, and develop like a fancy interface, which we're going to cover in a second, then you're kind of stuck always needing someone with those technical skills.
Yeah, again, it comes down to complexity and how much you want to invest in your tech systems. If, like Ezra said, if you have most cleaning organizations, I think by the nature of our work, are almost always growing. There's almost always more food. There's almost always more farms we could donate to, or who could donate to us. Well, obviously, there's more people who need them. So just by the nature of the work, we are growing, but kind of, I think what Ezra's getting at with the making sure your business processes are stable and before you invest too much in any one system. Salesforce being a big system. And again, this comes back to use Excel until it hurts. Are you able to get kind of the bare bones while you're still growing rapidly? If you're an organization that's still growing rapidly, because I've been through it with Boston Engineering. We first tried to implement Salesforce in I think 2018, and it just crashed and burned. To be honest, we didn't end up like, I don't even remember. I ended up leaving for a little bit just to take some personal time, but and then came back and like, what is happening? Where are we using Salesforce? Are we not? We hired Ezra at that point to become a consultant and really got to hone it because we had grown so rapidly. We had a little bit more clear at that point when I came back, which was like 2021, a little more clear vision of what we wanted out of the system, what we were getting at. And we had ownership. We had our operations manager at the time, Charlotte, who knew what she wanted out of the system instead of a bunch of people who were like, wouldn't it be nice if, wouldn't it be nice if, could we do this? Could we do this? The answer to all those questions is yes, we can do that. It would be nice if we could do that. But kind of again, to the point of someone needs to be owning it and saying, no, that would be nice in the future. But for now, what do we need? We need to know how many pounds from X farm last year so that we can give them a thank you or whatever.
How much time do we have?
You got about 15 minutes or 20 minutes.
Oh, great. All right, can you move the slide ahead? I don't know, once. Yeah, architecture, there we go. So, I was very briefly a middle school teacher, so forgive me if this is a little like pedantic. But I want to talk about sort of the basic architecture of Salesforce. I'm going to use a few words like object and the object is just like a tab in a spreadsheet, right? So, but yes, first we'll start with a little story. Thank you. All right, so Pete and Repeat meet at Applefield Farm on May 1st and harvest 220 pounds of only the spiciest arugula. They load it into their cars and they drive it to Beverly Bootstraps, where it will feed many delighted people. But what happens in Salesforce? So I want to just take you through basic architecture that I would say all of the Gleaning organizations I've worked for have used, although the names may be different. But yeah, let's the next one. Thank you. Okay, so first we operate on one side of the equation, the Gleaning side, right? And we've got a few things, some which you'll see are sort of repeated, but an account in Salesforce that comes right out of the box because account represents a grouping of people. So it's a household, it's an organization, it's a foundation that's going to give you a grant, right? In this case, it's a farm. So you don't have to create an account. You don't have to customize Salesforce, it already has it. But you may want to customize it to hold some information about organizations that you deal with. So I don't know, what's something about a farm that may not fit into Salesforce. Yeah, are they an orchard? Yeah, do they have an orchard? Do they not? That kind of thing. You may want to add fields for that. And then we get into the stuff that's totally not out of the box, that's customized, because again, Salesforce, I mean, everyone from Toyota to one of my clients is an executive recruiter. It's just him, and he uses Salesforce, right? And so no piece of software is going to fit for all of those organizations. So we make it fit, right? So we have three things on this side that are custom. Glean, which is like you go to the farm, you get some food, right? A glean item is one type of food that you harvested one day from a farm. This is like, again, very specific definitions, but they're helpful. A crop is the type of food you're harvesting. And what's nice is some of these you can reuse. So can you hit the thing? Thanks. So on the other side of the equation, right, you're donating the food or you're selling it if you have a food hub, Boston area gleaners, and you're reusing account, but in this case, it's a recipient organization. So again, not a different object, it's standard. You may want to do things so that your recipient organizations have different information than your farms do, and that's totally possible. It just gets hairy if your farm also runs a so you got your account, that's a recipient organization. You're still using crop, right? Because that hasn't changed. But you'll notice we don't reuse that glean item because things can get confusing, right? You can harvest arugula from a farm and then it can go to 3 or 4 different recipient organizations. Or you can harvest from several farms and use it all to go to one recipient organization. And so if we just reuse that one thing, it wouldn't fit together, right? And so we actually have, it sort of mimics that architecture, which is good because it gets into your brain that way. But we've got a drop off, which is kind of the analog to the glean. Drop off is a single donation to a recipient organization. And then a drop off item is one type of food you are donating one day to a recipient, right? Okay, and we can see this all together, I think. And we can, we just sort of filled in the scenario that we had. All right, so this, I would say this represents the thing that we've done, or that Matt and I have done for various organizations. And if you're using Salesforce, I actually am really curious if this doesn't match what you're using. I'm curious what you're doing. Because you might be right. And I would say, I just want to talk a little bit about some variables that might lead you to different choices. One thing Matt already mentioned is traceability. If you need exact food tracing, you may actually create yourself a little, what we call a junction object, a little thing that sits underneath or in between glean item and drop off item to represent, like, let's say you got arugula from 3 farms and sent it to 3 different recipient organizations, or you blended them all, and put them to one. Anyway, if someone gets sick and you need to trace it back exactly to the farm that you got it on the day that you got it, that's a possibility for a little more complex architecture. Also, as Matt mentioned, if you have refrigerated storage and you're storing a bunch of stuff, you may need some other choices to represent like what we have in storage, compared to just, this is all transactional. What we got, what we gave out, doesn't show what you have in the fridge. So
this isn't doing any sort of inventory management at this moment in this architecture. There's no space.
no, yeah, the question was, is this showing any inventory management? Not really.
You could stretch it. It would hurt.
Yeah, not really. Do you? Say quickly how that goes.
You're gonna put me on the spot. I think it's the junction object in between. So basically anytime one of these gets created, like Ezra said, there's something in between here. We call it an inventory item assignment, I think. I've changed the name. No one sees it, so it doesn't really matter. It's fine. But it's just this record, this database entry that exists that connects this to this every time these two connect. And then, so it's like an assignment because let's say when we use case quantities rather than pounds at Boston Air Cleaners, like we take this one step further and let's say this was 10 banana boxes. And this wasn't all 10 banana boxes, let's say this was 2, and then another 2 went to the Boston Food Bank or whatever. Each of those 2, or let's use 3 as an example, 2 went to Bootstraps, 2 went to Boston Food Bank, there would be an assignment for 2 and an assignment for 3. This would change, and again, for tracking the inventory, we started with 10, 2 plus 3 is 5, 10 minus 5, we have 5 left. That would show up here, but all that math was done on these kind of invisible middle objects. Everyone follow me on that? Ish. Yeah. And again, I'm happy to show all of this, and we have some screenshots of how it actually looks. Like I said, a lot of it's built on the back end.
Yeah, why don't you just mention volunteer tracking choice?
Yeah, did we include that? Can you go forward a slide or anything? No, you're right. It might be on here actually, but it's not that. So on either ends of these, really, I know organizations that have volunteers do the deliveries. Boston Area Cleaners doesn't, all of our staff does the deliveries, but we do have volunteers who help out with the gleans. So you could imagine that you could have a volunteer down here somewhere. There is a installable package that Salesforce provides called Volunteers for Salesforce, number 4, BFS, B4S. That's pretty good, but Ezra and I have both found that it's just as easy to just kind of rebuild it. If you have someone that, like some internal admin that's already doing some of this building, it's not that complex to just rebuild it and make it look nicer. It has a little bit more than you might need. But Boston Air Cleaners doesn't have our volunteers in Salesforce. We actually, some of you might be familiar with GleanWeb, which is, what's it, Salem Harvest, Dick gave the database that he developed that can track gleaning, incoming and outgoing, not as connected as this, but it's our volunteer portal at Boston Air Cleaners. We connected to our gleans just via a number. Every glean in GleanWeb has its own unique ID, 3393. We put that on Glean just so we know who was there. And then if we need to know who gleaned that arugula, we go to GleanWeb and we look it up. So just to say it can be built in Salesforce, it can be built outside of it.
I just want to give on the volunteer side, a quick shout out to Uproot in Colorado that Matt and I have both worked with. And they're doing all their volunteers in Salesforce. and also using their like sign up. Both their sign up to become a volunteer and their sign up page to sign up for specific gleans were built with Salesforce. And so they're external websites that interact directly with Salesforce. They're sending their confirmation emails through Salesforce, their reminder emails through Salesforce. So yeah, on that side, all the volunteer stuff that they're doing, and you can go to their website and look at it if you want, is all Salesforce based.
Cleanup's free. Okay.
But Dick only builds a few of them every year.
Yeah,
So you're
he's
gonna have to
a
get
full
on that.
volunteer. and
Yeah.
I'm speaking for him when I say it's free, but. Anyway, so this is an example of Boston area cleaners. There's a lot of words on here, there's a lot of information. We probably have a little too much. My constant life mission to make it easier for our staff to read, but this is an incoming donation, so a glean essentially. I grabbed one that Deb did. Shout out Deb in the back there at Applefield Park. So we gleaned, in this case, 10 RPCs of arugula. I wish I had a pointer here. 15 banana boxes of butternut squash. So this is the incoming side, just to show you what it looks like and kind of what we have on here. This is all, you're better describing the difference between them.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say, because I think we may run out of time for some of the extension stuff that we have. But I would say largely from here to here is all sort of standard, mostly not. The fields themselves are custom, but the interface is standard, and so you're not developing your own interface. And then from here down, the things where Matt and Beck wanted a little bit more functionality in terms of classes, but in terms of like adding multiple things at once,
Editing multiple things.
at once. Salesforce doesn't do that out of the box that well, and so Matt built his own, their own interfaces there, which means it costs a little bit more to maintain them.
That's just the outgoing side, so it's Beverly bootstraps. It's not the same products as you'll see. These are beets and bok choy, and I think broccoli's cut off at the end there. So just to show you the other side of the equation, and same thing, everything from estimated pallets, we can read that up, and everything is standard interface with a little bit of customization. Everything from order items down is much more involved to customize. So pros and cons. This is a report, so this is the data out. It's more the data out in the moment. So this is a live shot of our inventory on, whenever I grabbed the screenshot, probably 16th, 17th of April. Items that we had in stock and ready to be distributed. So it's very useful for showing data. Salesforce can be especially a large amount of it. This is a dashboard, our food access dashboard. Our fiscal year is April. So unfortunately, the monthly dashboard looks lame because it's just April. But anyway, you get the point. Those would be a bar graph for the whole year. If this was December, better yet, March. Should have thought ahead and screen cap that in March. But you can see, again, this is data out. This is all of the data that Salesforce is compiling for us in a moment's notice. You can do some of this in a Google Sheet or in Excel. Granted, definitely, but it's a good amount of work, and it's going to be a little clunky. I will say it's gotten better since when I last was trying to do it in Excel, but and Salesforce has its limitations with dashboards as well. I will say they own Tableau. I don't know anything about Tableau, but that's another fancy way of looking at data. Now, this is just how we would build the volunteer shift. The contact being the individual. So if I volunteered, that would say Matt Crawford. Volunteer shift is, we need 5 volunteers on December 5th to glean arugula. Glean and the counter the same. Applefield far in between. So we're close on time.
About 5 minutes left.
5 minutes. So we've kind of alluded to the ways in which Salesforce can be extended. I'm going to try and highlight some of the ways, and this is one of its big reasons to consider adopting it. Because a lot of these are free, some of them cost not that much, some of them cost a little bit, but it's, I don't know, was it a multi-billion-dollar company? I don't know. It's one of the biggest companies. They have the biggest friggin' building in San Francisco, right? So there's a lot of resources that they have. There's a big environment of developers and people building things that you can install out of the box from this thing called the App Exchange. Look at that. Flows. So when Ezra pointed out the parts of the screen where Boston Area Gleaners is able to edit or add multiple items at a time, that's a thing called a screen flow, which is a really, Ezra doesn't code, I don't code, but it's a way to program without having to type things in. Click, and it has, we call it logic, where it's, if this happens, do this. If that happens, do that. If the user clicks this, do all this stuff. Fairly easy to learn if your brain kind of thinks like that, and it's can be used for screen flows as well as back-end automation, so automatically updating data. All of the inventory assignment I mentioned between the glean item and the outgoing item, that's all done via flow. Maybe on some flows you want to App Exchange is the app store of Salesforce. Some examples of what we've used at Boston Area Gleaners, label printing. There's an app called Spigot, which works with Dymo label printers, which are pretty great to a certain scale. We've since moved on to Zebra, but actually worked with the guy who made Spigot to develop us a custom API app thing, which is useful. Document generation. So we currently use an app called PDF Butler to generate a PDF based off of our data and send thank yous to farmers immediately after any glean, as well as year-end kind of tax. There's tax incentives for farmers donating. So at the end of the year, I compile a spreadsheet as well as a PDF saying here are the official records of what you donated this year. Could be used for anything that you might put in a PDF or a letter. So out of the box, one thing I did also want to mention, Salesforce can send emails. You can also set up automated emails for your own staff for reminders, for example. So just something I thought of earlier. Hey, you haven't gleaned from this farm in 6 months. Do you want to call them? This is an email reminding you to call them. Things like that can be easily set up in Salesforce, which is nice. Spreadsheet, in order to do that, you're going to need some extra work. And again, because it's such a big platform, there's a lot of integrations. They own Slack. So if you use Slack in your organization, there's some integration there. I've seen integrations with Constant Contact and MailChimp and other email marketing services, Form Assembly, Eventbrite. We did Hope's Harvest, Zapier, which is another tool that can send data to and from a lot of software systems. And then external websites are very quickly mentioned. Experience sites earlier, that's what Uproot's volunteer site is built on. So it's a native way that you can build a public-facing website that interacts with your Salesforce data. I was on a New Balance support forum. I still don't remember why. I was looking for support from a shoe company, and I happened to notice that the domain name was newbalance.sites.com, which means that it's a Salesforce site. I thought that was interesting. Maybe I had a hole in my shoe. Now we're getting into overtime here. Yeah, we'll go to questions. We can show you other stuff later. I'll start with questions.
We have time for just a couple questions if folks have them.
Yeah.
I know you might not be able to give an estimate, but based on Gleaning orgs you work with, I know because these are different. What's the average kind of startup consulting cost of getting something together? Or a big range, if you have a big range.
Yeah. Well, I charge $125 an hour. So let's see. I'll talk about a proposal I just sent out. Was can we get bare bones sort of customer relationship management and inventory stuff for 40 hours? And the answer was definitely yes. There are a few things that are always going to make it bigger than that. So one is the custom interfaces. So if you want a lot of there's always a balance between again, the complexity and the cost of creating a custom interface and maintaining it versus, I I hate the fact that I have to enter every single row as a new record. I have to hit these, so many extra clicks. I'm not going to do it, right? So custom interfaces are going to make it more expensive. And then the other thing is data migration. I have learned to never estimate a data migration as less than 40 hours of my time. Because it never is, right? Like the data, your historical data, and I've worked with organizations that I am super impressed with how like pristine they've kept their data. It's still shaped differently than the way that Salesforce is going to accept it. And it's often from different sources. Sometimes you have to take multiple rows and squish them into one. Sometimes you have to take one row and expand it into many. So yeah, data migration is always going to take a lot of time. That help?
Yeah.
Other questions? Yeah.
In terms of like bare bones, you got custom interfaces like the ones that work for Gleaning. How much is that per month?
Okay, so the question was, once you built your
Just bare bones Gleaning interface in Salesforce.
Gleaning, so sorry, I'm gonna be picky about word choice because I don't want to
Yeah.
lie to you. Are you talking about like the sort of tables that we showed, the architecture?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, theoretically, you get that and it shouldn't. Again, it's sort of about the stability of process, right? If you're doing the same thing week after week, month after month, year after year, it may not cost you anything, right? If you're growing a lot and you're starting to, hey, we got this new location and now we have a fridge and we can store stuff, or we're going to start, a food hub, we're going to start interacting differently with organizations. That's where, or if you've got an executive that likes to change what they want to see out of the system all the time, which is frequently the case. It could be more expensive. And again, the reason why I was picky about the word interface as opposed to architecture is that the interfaces themselves, if you want to enter data differently than the way Salesforce does automatically, that's more likely to you're gonna need someone on call once in a while to just fix it when it breaks and that kind of thing. Cool. I see the hook coming for us.
Yeah, this was a lot to cram in, so we put both of our contact info up there. I'm happy to give tours of Boston Gleaner, Salesforce, Chat IT. If there's a lot of interest, I'll probably try and schedule a group, or just one-on-ones, fine too. Ezra's accepting new clients. Shout out to him. He's great to work with. So, yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you.